The first time I met Karen Brockway, she stood in my driveway with the confidence of a woman who believed clipboards were more powerful than the Constitution. She had that smug tilt to her chin, sunglasses perched like she was about to inspect an army barracks, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I had just stepped out of my truck, still carrying boxes from my move, when she marched up. "You must be Michael Rist," she said, like she already hated the sound of my name. "I'm the HOA president here. Before we go any further, I need to discuss your lake access fees." I blinked, tired from the long drive. "Lake access fees? I own this house outright. My title includes shoreline rights." Karen's smile widened. "Yes, well, this is a community-maintained lake. All new residents are required to pay the lake preservation and access fee before they can, you know," she gestured vaguely toward the shimmering water just beyond the tree line, "move in permanently. It's $40,000. I laughed. Out loud. $40,000? For what? Are you stocking it with goldfish?" Karen didn't laugh. She leaned in, lowering her voice as if we were co-conspirators in some dirty deal. "I'm giving you the neighborly rate, detective. Some folks pay more." I froze mid-step. She knew I was a detective, probably got it from public records, but the way she said it made my gut tighten. I'd retired from the state police after 35 years, but my current job was sensitive. Investigating HOA fraud in 3 counties isn't something you advertise when you're trying to catch crooks who wear pearls and golf shirts instead of ski masks. "Karen," I said, "that's not a real fee. It's extortion." Her expression shifted, just slightly. "Oh, I assure you, it's very real. And if you don't pay, you can't stay. Community rules. We've already had people removed for trespassing." She said it like a threat, not a warning. I crossed my arms. "I'm not paying you a dime." That was when the smile dropped entirely. She scribbled something on her clipboard so aggressively her pen nearly snapped. "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. We'll handle this, formally." I watched her stomp back toward her golf cart, heels clacking on my driveway like the ticking of a bomb. What I didn't know then, but would learn very soon, was just how far Karen was willing to go. By nightfall, she'd called the cops, telling them a squatter had moved into the neighborhood. And when those squad cars pulled up, lights flashing against the trees, Karen was waiting on my lawn with her arms crossed, a queen in her little kingdom. The part she wasn't ready for. I hadn't worn a badge in years, but I still carried one. And when I pulled it out, Karen's smile froze. Her husband, the county sheriff, arrived 10 minutes later. When he saw me, his face went pale. Because if Karen was dirty, and she was, he had to know I was the last man she wanted on her street. What happened after that, exposed the biggest HOA racket in state history. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before I tore her little empire apart, Karen tried everything: fines, lies, intimidation, and something much worse. And I let her. I let her dig her own grave, clipboard and all. The first squad car rolled up just after 7 p.m., headlights cutting across my driveway. Then came another. And another. By the time the fourth pulled in, my neighbors were peeking out from behind curtains, phones already in hand. Karen stood on my lawn like a queen watching her troops, that same smug smile plastered across her face. "Detective Rist," she said sweetly, as if we were on first-name terms. "I warned you this would happen. You're trespassing on HOA property. These officers are here to escort you out." I raised an eyebrow. "HOA property? Karen, I bought this house. Deeds in my name." She didn't even blink. "Fake documents aren't going to fool me. Or the law." The lead officer, a young guy barely out of his 20s, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Sir, we received a call that you're illegally occupying this residence. We just need to see some ID and proof of ownership." Karen, meanwhile, was beaming like Christmas came early. I kept my voice calm. Happy to oblige. I walked inside, grabbed the folder I had prepared, because after 3 decades in law enforcement, you learn to keep receipts, and handed it over. Property deed, tax records, and even the original builder's survey, all neatly clipped together. The officer flipped through them, glancing nervously toward Karen. "That's fake," Karen snapped before he could even speak. "Look at him, for heaven's sake. Does he look like someone who can afford lake property? He's been here less than a week, and now he's trying to scam us for shoreline rights." I tilted my head. "Karen, do you realize how illegal it is to file a false police report?" Her smirk didn't falter. "Not if it's true." The officer cleared his throat, choosing his words carefully. "Mrs. Brockway, his documentation checks out." Karen's eyes narrowed. "It's forged. Call Sheriff Brockway. My husband will handle this personally." Ah. So that was the game. Pull strings. Intimidate with her husband's badge. I shrugged. By all means. 5 minutes later, a black SUV rolled up. Sheriff Alan Brockway stepped out, adjusting his belt with the weight of authority. Karen practically bounced toward him. "Alan, arrest this man right now. He's not supposed to be here." The sheriff looked at me, and froze. "Wrist?" he muttered. His voice cracked just slightly. "Evening, Alan," I said casually, pulling my wallet from my back pocket. I flipped it open, showing the polished gold shield inside. "State Police Special Investigations Unit. You remember me from the Redman HOA case, don't you?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. He glanced at Karen, whose smugness faltered for the first time all evening. Karen frowned. "What's wrong?" "He's trespassing. Arrest him." But Alan wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes darted between me and the officers, his posture shifting from authority to damage control. "Karen, we need to talk. Now." Karen blinked. "What do you mean we need to talk?" "Arrest him." Alan didn't answer. Instead, he gestured for the officers to step back, then lowered his voice. "Wrist, what are you doing here?" "Living in my own house," I said flatly. "But now that I'm here, maybe I'll look into why your HOA is charging residents 40 grand for lake access. Sounds like something my department should know about, don't you think?" Alan went pale. Karen's head snapped toward him. "Alan, what is he talking about?" He didn't answer. But I could see it in his face, the panic. Something was very, very wrong in this neighborhood, and the sheriff knew it. Karen, still oblivious to just how much trouble she was in, crossed her arms and sneered. "You don't scare me, detective. This is a private community. We make the rules here." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "No, Karen. The law makes the rules. And I think you've just given me every reason to stick around." The sheriff muttered something under his breath, something Karen didn't catch, but I did. "Not here," he whispered. "Not like this." That was when I knew, Alan wasn't just worried about his wife being embarrassed. He was worried about being exposed. The racket was real. And now, I had my first lead. What Karen didn't realize as she stood there fuming, barking at the officers to do their job, was that I was already doing mine. The investigation had just begun. The next morning, Karen's harassment campaign kicked into high gear. At 6:30 a.m., I stepped outside to grab the newspaper and found 3 bright orange violation notices taped to my front door. One claimed my mailbox was non-compliant because it was 0.8 inches too tall. Another accused me of improper vehicle storage for parking my truck in my own driveway overnight. The third, a personal favorite, listed unauthorized alterations to shoreline vegetation, which was impressive considering I didn't even have a dock yet. Karen was standing across the street by her golf cart, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, watching my reaction like a hunter waiting for a trap to spring. "Karen," I called out, holding up the notices, "this is getting pathetic." She smiled in that smug way she always did. "You should have just paid the fee, Michael. It would have been easier for everyone." I didn't bother responding. I went back inside, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. If Karen thought I was just another homeowner she could bully, she was about to find out how wrong she was. By noon, I had logged into the county clerk's database. Public records are a goldmine if you know where to look, and I know exactly where to look. Karen's HOA, officially called the Lake Serenity Preservation Association, had filed for nonprofit status 5 years ago. On paper, it collected maintenance fees for community improvements, walking trails, shoreline cleanups, water testing. But the financial trail told a very different story. There were 3 separate bank accounts under different LLCs, all registered to Karen's home address. Large sums were being paid as consulting fees to a shell company called Whitestone Services, which, unsurprisingly, listed Sheriff Alan Brockway as a silent partner. And the big one, quarterly lake access contributions, averaging $37,000 per household for new residents. This wasn't some overzealous HOA enforcing rules about mailboxes. This was organized fraud, and it was making someone very rich. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Wrist," I answered. "Michael, it's Alan." His voice was tense, low. "You need to let this go." "Let what go?" I asked, though I already knew what he meant. He sighed. "Karen's passionate, but she's not a criminal. If you start digging, you're going to stir up trouble for people who don't deserve it. Alan, I've been doing this job for 3 decades. I know when someone's skimming money. And you're in this up to your neck." There was a pause. "You don't understand how things work here. This HOA keeps the neighborhood running. People like it quiet. Clean. They're happy to pay for that." "Really?" I leaned back in my chair. "Or are they just too scared to ask why they're paying 40 grand for access to a public lake?" Alan didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his tone had shifted from pleading to something harder. "Leave it alone, Wrist. You're not on duty anymore. This isn't your case." "Alan," I said, "it is now." The line went dead. That evening, I drove down to the shoreline to take photos for evidence. The lake was calm, sunlight bouncing off the water like diamonds. But I wasn't alone. Karen was already there, standing with 2 men in maintenance uniforms. They were whispering to her as they unrolled caution tape along the path that led to my property. When she saw me, her expression hardened. "Michael, you're trespassing on a restricted section of shoreline. This area is for HOA members only." I laughed, pulling out my phone. "Karen, this shoreline is public access. Your HOA doesn't own it." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so the workers wouldn't hear. "You think you're clever, digging into our finances. But you're making a mistake." "Funny," I said, snapping photos of the taped-off path, "that's exactly what your husband told me." For the first time, Karen's confidence cracked. "Just a flicker, but I saw it." "You don't know what you're getting into," she hissed. "This isn't just about me." "Then who's it about?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "You'll find out. But by then, it'll be too late." Later that night, back at my kitchen table, I sifted through every piece of evidence I had so far: bank records, shell company filings, HOA meeting minutes. Buried deep in a scanned PDF of last year's HOA board notes was the jackpot, a single-line item that read, "Reimbursement, $120,000, Lake Serenity Association, Brockway personal account." It wasn't even disguised. Karen and Alan weren't just skimming. They were pocketing HOA fees outright. If that was true, this wasn't just fraud. It was racketeering. The next morning, I made a call I hadn't made in months. Wrist, a gruff voice answered. Hey, Frank. I've got a case for you. You're supposed to be retired, Frank said. Yeah, I replied, staring out the window at Karen's golf cart parked smugly at the end of my driveway. But this one's personal. Frank chuckled. You always did hate bullies. What are we looking at? Biggest HOA scam in state history, I said. And it's time to bring it down. By the following week, Karen had shifted from harassment to outright sabotage. It started small, mysterious, anonymous, complaints filed against me, HOA security cameras suddenly appearing near my property line, and my mailbox being stuffed with HOA newsletters accusing me of aggressive behavior. Then came the real move. I woke up one morning to the sound of a tow truck backing into my driveway. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, to find Karen standing beside it with her ever-present clipboard. Michael, she said with a smile so tight it looked painful, your truck is parked in violation of community standards. We're towing it until you pay your outstanding fines. I didn't even raise my voice. Karen, if you touch that truck, you'll regret it. The tow driver shifted nervously, glancing between us. Karen's confidence faltered for just a second before she snapped, do it. He's bluffing. I took a slow step forward, pulled my phone from my pocket, and pointed it at the tow truck. This vehicle is parked on private property. You move it, you're committing theft. And this entire conversation is being recorded. You'll want to think about that before you hook it up. The driver froze, looked at Karen, and muttered, Lady, I'm not getting sued over this. He climbed back into the truck and drove off, leaving Karen standing in my driveway seething. You can't keep hiding behind your badge forever, she spat. I don't need to hide behind anything, I said. But maybe you should. Karen stormed off, muttering something about new charges being filed. That was when I knew she was running out of options. People like Karen only get sloppy when they're desperate, and she had just handed me exactly what I needed, a reason to push harder. That afternoon, I sat at my laptop, setting up what I like to call the net. Years of working undercover taught me that greedy people will always take the bait if you make it look tempting enough. I drafted an email to the HOA board, making it appear as though I was ready to negotiate the lake access fee. I claimed I had cash available, but wanted a face-to-face meeting to settle things quietly. Within an hour, I got a reply, not from the HOA's official account, but from Whitestone Services, Allen's shell company. The message was short and to the point. Meeting confirmed. Tonight. 8 p.m. Bring cash. Bingo. At 7:45 that night, I sat in my truck in the empty HOA community center parking lot. The place was dark, except for a single light glowing in the window. My body cam was live, transmitting directly to Frank, who was parked 2 blocks away with 2 other detectives from the state police. At 7:58, a black SUV pulled in. Allen stepped out first, scanning the lot nervously, followed by Karen, who looked far too confident for someone walking into what she thought was an illegal cash deal. Michael, she greeted, trying to sound casual. Smart man. You're finally doing the right thing. Right thing for who? I asked, stepping closer. Karen glanced at Allen, who avoided eye contact. For the community, of course. 40,000 in cash, and we can make all your issues disappear. I let the silence stretch, watching her face. She mistook it for hesitation and pushed harder. You don't want to fight us, Michael. We're reasonable people. But if you make this difficult, you'll regret it. I smiled. Funny. That's almost exactly what your husband said. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but that's when Frank and his team moved in. Flashlights cut through the dark as officers surrounded the SUV. Karen Brockway, Allen Brockway, Frank announced, stepping forward with cuffs in hand, you're under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud residents of Lake Serenity. Karen froze, her clipboard slipping from her hands and hitting the pavement with a dull clatter. Alan muttered something under his breath, but he didn't fight as Frank cuffed him. Karen fought until the very end. You can't do this. This is a misunderstanding. I was just following community policy. I stepped forward, leaning close enough for her to hear me over her own protests. Karen, you didn't just break community rules. You broke the law. And in my world, that's the only rule that matters. Frank led them both to the SUV, Karen shouting the entire way. As they drove off, the neighborhood lights flicked on one by one. Curious faces peeked out from windows, whispering to each other. By morning, everyone would know. The biggest HOA racket in state history had just collapsed, clipboard and all. And I wasn't done yet. Because what we found on Alan's laptop later that night. That was just the beginning. The morning after the arrest, the neighborhood was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. I couldn't step outside without seeing people huddled in driveways whispering to each other. Karen's golf cart sat abandoned near the clubhouse, its clipboard still wedged in the seat like a fallen crown. But the real action was happening downtown, in the interrogation rooms. Alan cracked first. I predicted he would, men like him always do. He wasn't built for prison, and he knew it. By noon, he was sitting across from me, hands clasped, sweat beading on his forehead. Michael, he said, his voice low, I didn't start this. Karen, she pushed everything too far. I leaned back, watching him squirm. But you signed off on it. You pocketed the money. He swallowed hard. I thought it was legal. At first. She told me it was, incentives. Community development grants. By the time I realized it was wrong, it was too late. Too late for you, maybe, I said. But you can help yourself now. Tell us where the rest of the money went. Alan hesitated, then nodded slowly. There's more. Accounts Karen didn't even tell me about. Offshore. She was planning to cash out and disappear. That was the break we needed. Karen, on the other hand, didn't break, she exploded. When Frank and I entered the interrogation room, she was pacing like a caged tiger, her hair coming loose, her voice hoarse from yelling. You think you've won, wrist? She hissed as soon as she saw me. You think arresting me will change anything? These people need me. I built this community. Without me, it falls apart. I sat across from her calmly. Karen, you didn't build a community. You built a racket. And it's over. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of that old smugness flashing back. You don't know everything. You think Alan gave you all the files? He doesn't even know half of it. You'll never find where I hid the rest. I smiled, sliding a folder onto the table. Funny thing about smart criminals, they always think they're smarter than everyone else. But you left a trail. Offshore accounts, coded transfers, fake invoices. We have it all. Karen's face drained of color. And here's the best part, I added. Alan's cooperating. Full testimony. You're done. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen Brockway looked truly afraid. By the end of the week, news crews were swarming the neighborhood. Headlines called it the Lake Serenity Scandal. Residents learned they had been overcharged nearly $2 million in fake fees over 5 years. Alan pled guilty to fraud and agreed to testify against Karen, who was facing a long list of charges: racketeering, mail fraud, conspiracy. She'd likely spend the next 20 years in a state prison. As for me, I stayed in the house. Neighbors who had avoided me at first now waved when they walked by. A few even stopped to thank me. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the lake, I stood on my porch sipping coffee, watching the calm water shimmer. Karen had tried to buy me off. She'd tried to intimidate me. She'd even tried to ruin me. But in the end, All she'd managed to do was hand me the biggest case of my post-retirement career. I looked at the lake, peaceful now, and couldn't help but smile. Karen brought the clipboard. But I brought the law.